see them all come in at once. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Your cameras and microphones have been set to remain off, and we ask that you leave them that way. Oh, we got a couple more coming in. Great. Still joining. A couple more still joining.
Hi,
All right, well, I am Carrie, and I am on the Andersons events team. I just wanted to take a second to welcome all of you to our event with Alexandra Bracken, and thank you all for being here tonight. The Andersons family, of course, has been selling books, believe it or not, independently since 1875. So we've seen some stuff. We've made it through some really tough seasons, including the last pandemic, believe it or not. But nothing has ever been quite like the landscape that we find ourselves in here during COVID times. So we just wanted to let you know that your support of this event and purchase of the book through us, those are things that really mean a lot to us. We are, there's just no real words for me to express our gratitude for those people who are supporting our business during this really hard time. And by being here tonight, you are supporting us. So we are so grateful. A couple of things, just a little housekeeping matters to talk to you about before we get started. As mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off for the duration of the event, so please keep them off. If you would like to ask a question, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so please submit questions through the chat. And I am begging you guys to submit questions. As we all know, this virtual landscape, not the same as our in-person landscape, not the same vibe, but immeasurably better when people ask questions so that we can make it fun, more fun and interactive, and more fun if you guys interact in the chat as well. So you can go ahead and be submitting those questions during the entire event through the Q&A chat of the event here. And then I will be going through those while the authors are speaking, and I will be, taking some out to ask at the end. So the earlier you get them in, actually, the better. And like I said, it really does make for a better event if you guys submit questions. So that's it. Oh, and then also, if you ordered a book for tonight, please give us about 24 hours to come pick it up. So maybe Saturday morning. If you're picking up, if you ordered it to be shipped to you, I'm pretty sure our internet shipping person will be in tomorrow. So she's going to hope to get all those out either tomorrow or Monday to you guys. There's quite a few for this event, so we'll try to get through them all tomorrow. If you have not ordered your book for tonight or would like another signed copy, of course, I will be putting info on that through the chat. So, but getting on to the good stuff. Let's move to the stuff we're all here for. Hold on, I'm still admitting the room. Alexandra Bracken is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Darkest Mind series and Passenger series. Born and raised in Arizona, she studied English at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, which is such a beautiful college. Her work is available, of course, across the world in over 15 languages, and it's been adapted for the big screen and all sorts of very exciting things like that. Tonight, of course, she is in conversation with another fabulous author, Isabel Ibanez, who is the author of Woven in Moonlight, which is a fantastic novel. And her newest tale, written in Starlight, will actually come out on the 26th of this month. So check that out. She was born in Boca Raton, still lives in Florida, and is the proud daughter of 2 Bolivian immigrants. And with that, I am going to turn my camera off and let you ladies take the show.
Isabel, you got to update your bio now. You had a big life.
I know. I don't actually live in Florida. I live in Asheville. That's my bad.
I know. Oh, I'm so jealous. We've had the hottest, driest summer ever in Arizona, and then it's just been a really hot, dry winter too. So I'm jealous of your trees in nature.
It's supposed to snow tonight.
Oh my.
I know.
76 degrees today. It's the pits, honestly. But
anyway,
yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming. We're really excited that you're here. Feel free to chat. Let us know where you're from in the chat box. We love to see it. You can ask us questions as we're talking, and we'll probably jump in a little bit. But if you have a bigger question, we might save it till the end. So I guess the disclaimer for this event is that, times are incredibly stressful and weird, and there's a lot of funky energy out there. And, we've had a couple really troubling events happen in the past 48 hours. And we are just hoping that we can provide, an hour's reprieve from those events for you. And we can just be together with our community and just have like a really nice chat about writing and about books and enjoy. But we don't want to make light of what's happened or anything like that. We just want to take a slight news detox. So Isabel and I chatted before the event. And so what we're going to do is we're going to each tell you a little bit about our current book / upcoming book, and then just kind of dive into some questions. So, oh, and Isabel, I thought that was so cool that today is the 1-year anniversary of Woven and Moonlight. Congratulations.
Thank you. I can't believe, it came out during a pandemic. It feels so weird. Like just.
Yeah, like, oh, wait.
I know. So much has happened since then. I can't believe that this was my debut year as well, which is so strange.
It's wild. I have Woven and Moonlight right here. I just finished reading it the other night and it's magical. So, all right. So
you should go first.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I'm a little frazzled because of everything that's happened, but also.
Before you begin, I want to tell you that your poster looks fabulous. And
thank you. You guys will have to tell me, what do you think I should do with this enormous poster I made? I accidentally bought like the jumbo size instead of the normal poster size. So when I went to FedEx to pick it up, they were like, are you gonna like hang this on a wall in your home?
the proportion from the poster to the book.
Oh, I know, it's a big book. It's like the bigger adult trim size. And I'm like, I also I haven't gotten my author copies yet. So it's just like my one little copy instead of this like mountain of them. Anyway.
So
this is a very interesting week for Lore to come out. And I will just give you kind of like a quicker pitch for it. When I was telling my editor about this project initially, I told her that the tone of it, I wanted it to feel like Percy Jackson's mean older sister with like scars and a bad attitude. So I knew from the beginning it was going to be kind of like a darker ride, even if it was set in New York and even if the gods also featured. But the story is centered on Lore. She's a 17-year-old living in New York City. And unlike the rest of us, she kind of has a special destiny in that she grew up in this secretive Spartan-like society of hunters. And so every 7 years, for 7 days, these hunters gather in a location and a hunt known as the Agon takes place. And so for those 7 days, 9 of the Greek gods who are cursed to walk the earth as mortal by Zeus for an attempted uprising against him, he cursed them, so they have to walk as mortal for the week. And if one of the hunters can kill the god, they can take that god's power and immortality. And so Lore has left this world. She left it behind 7 years ago when her family was murdered. By the way, Lore has the saddest backstory of any character I've ever written. I still sometimes get really upset thinking about it, which is a weird place to be. But so she's left this world behind and she wants nothing to do with it. But unfortunately, the hunt is back in her city. And on the first night, a wounded Athena shows up on her doorstep. And she basically offers Lore a deal that if Lore will agree to help protect her and hide her for that week so she survives, Athena will give Lore the one thing Lore's always wanted but thought was impossible, which is vengeance for her murdered family. So it kicks off, the book is set over a week. It is standalone contemporary fantasy. It's like a mouthful. I should be better at the pitch by now, and yet I'm not. So
pitches are so hard. How do you boil down into 3 to 5 sentences? I've never known that.
I know. Well, okay, so Isabel, tell us about both Woven and Moonlight because it's out in paperback and written in Starlight.
Okay, so Woven and Moonlight is the story of a decoy condesa, and she infiltrates a corrupt government and sends coded messages back to the rebels through her magical weaving. It's inspired by Bolivian history and the current political climate, which was pretty scary for a little while for my family. And then written in Starlight, which I have right here. Anyway, written in Starlight is about an exiled condesa, which is Spanish for countess, and she's exiled to the Amazon jungle. And while she's in the Amazon jungle, she has never been trained for anything, does not know how to boil water, and somehow has to survive. And she's been sheltered. And so while she's there, she realizes that she has an opportunity to find the lost city of gold. And if she takes it, she might be able to secure allies to win back this throne that she believes is her birthright.
Oh, I'm like so excited to start reading Written in Starlight. I finished Woven in Moonlight a couple of days ago, and I'm so mad that I waited to read it for so long. It's like a very wonderful action-packed story with a lot of like really unexpected and like wonderful twists and turns in it. And so I feel like we could start off just by talking a little bit about why we wanted to focus on the particular folklore, mythology, and history that we did. So like, how did you approach it for Woven and Written? Let's call them Woven and Written. So I don't get.
Woven was interesting. I really was inspired by actual Bolivian history and the events. And Bolivia has this very long history of colonization and oppression and violence. It's a really kind of tragic story. And then paired with the current political climate, my family was going through, it was just a scary situation, and Bolivia's future felt very uncertain and complicated. And so when I sat down to write Woven in Moonlight, I was definitely inspired to write the story of a revolution and what I thought and what I would hope for the future of Bolivia. Is that your cute puppy?
I have to go open the door so he can go potty. I'm sorry. Keep talking, please. I'm listening. I promise. I'm sorry.
Okay, I feel like Alex's dog is a celebrity. He's Teddy, and he's the cutest. Teddy. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. So then, Written in Starlight. For that mythology, it's actually my father was born and raised in the Amazon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, my grandfather speaks fluent Quechua. It's been like his stories of growing up in the jungle are amazing. He, he lived in he was born in this village that was inaccessible by road. And so to go anywhere, he had to go by river in a canoe that he built himself. And so when he was growing up, he was told often of this legend, this myth of a lost city in the Bolivian Amazon. And actually, I think the last explorer who went looking for Paititi was in 1997. And he went in and he never came back out. So,
whoa,
that's
a good story.
I mean, my dad is full of good stories. Like, he can trump me every single time when I would complain in high school, like, oh, my hair is so frizzy. And he's like, when I was your age, I was hunting for my lunch at 7. I'm like, okay.
In rivers.
All right. Okay.
Wow, what an incredible story.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up like for a lot of my life, my mom, it was very important to her that I would not lose these stories or my Bolivianness because I was born here. And so 3 months out of the year, up until I was 18, she would just kind of mail me to Bolivia and I would stay with my grandparents. So
oh my gosh,
different kinds of stories.
That's so incredible. Like, what a gift too. It's amazing how, like, so for lore, like one of the reasons I've always wanted to write a story about Greek mythology is because my mom's side of the family is Greek. It's like so she doesn't have a relationship with her father. So it's her mother's side of the family is sort of like her family to us. And it is a very big family. So my great grandparents came over to the United States from Greece separately. Oh my gosh. So like I'll get into this in a second, but like my grandmother was the youngest of 13 kids. She slept between her parents in bed at night and they had no more kids after that. But she was like the youngest of 8 girls, had like a hard life, it was an immigrant family in Lowell, Massachusetts. They all worked in the mills, but like I've always been kind of obsessed with this side of the family because they had such amazing stories. And I feel like we kind of inherit folklore and mythology and a sense of history and, belonging through our families, obviously, but
sure.
This like the Greek side of my family, for whatever reason, they were just always like very, dare I say, like kind of like high drama people. Like they were like, you can kind of like get a sense of the like epicness of the mythology through them. Like my poor great grandfather immigrated to the United States. He lived in up in kind of like northwestern Thessaly, if you guys are familiar at all with Greece, which I do not expect you to be, but and he ended up immigrating after, so he had a wife and a young baby, and they both died while he was away fighting in like a skirmish with the Turks. The wife died, I think, of an illness, but the baby literally starved to death. Like the story just gets like sadder and sadder and sadder as you peel back all of these different layers. He was like a really wonderful man too. And so he came over to the United States, and then Yaya is the Greek word that you would call like your grandmother. In our family, when we say Yaya, we mean my great grandmother. She was like the one true Yaya of the family, you could say, because of how big my mom's generation ended up being. But she came over because her brother like might have murdered someone in Greece. Like the family just like didn't talk about it. So we're like, but she was happy, I think, to leave Greece and come to the United States. So like I would hear these stories about like my Aunt Julia, who literally flew across the country with a knife to stab my estranged grandfather at my mom's wedding reception. Like she was like demonstrating how she was gonna do it, and my uncles had to like talk her down and like wrestle this knife away from her because she was 100% serious. So I've like always been just like entranced by the Greek side of the family, and I like have always wanted to write this book, but thank God I like didn't grow up in a murderous cult of Greek descent.
I love your use of Greek myths in this story.
Oh, thank you.
I absolutely love. I was low-key obsessed growing up. I still, when I go home, we have a home in Bolivia, and I left a lot of my old books, and I think 50% of them are just books on Greek myths. So as I was reading it, I was kept thinking and wondering which of the myths is your favorite, because there's just so many.
Oh my gosh, there's so many, and they're all kind of like so twisted. Like not all of them, but like I would say a solid 90% of Greek mythology is like incredibly dark and problematic and kind of twisted. And it's always like, I'm not at all surprised that we still have kind of a fascination with it, just because it really is unafraid to kind of look at the darker side of humanity. And but I think I'm like, when is like one of the nicer myths that I like? It's like, I was gonna say Prometheus, but then he gets punished for stealing fire and he gets his like liver pecked out for forever. So but yeah, I think like growing up, I've really loved the adventure stories like the Odyssey and the Search for the Golden Fleece and all of that. So yeah, did you have a favorite myth, or do you have a favorite just folklore story in general?
Yes, if I ever have a daughter, my favorite character is Penelope.
Oh,
and I know it's like, Penelope, she's a white, like, but I really loved her steadfastness. I really loved that she waited, and I love that she was a weaver, which is like a very big Bolivian artistic thing. And I also loved how cunning she was, and how she, even though they were men and they were pounding against her door and like threatening her to do this or do that or whatever, she still like was managed to just kind of rise above it and outsmart all of them. And so I really loved that. And then the other myth that I loved was Cupid and Psyche.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. Like the one legitimately romantic.
Yes.
Story that
When they end up together.
Yeah.
And not as like
one where they all like, they both drown in the ocean together. Then like Orpheus turns around at the last second.
Like.
Yeah. And that one, it's kind of interesting too, because you can kind of see some Greek myths, how they like filtered out into like European fairy tales and whatnot. And I find it so interesting. I don't know if you guys also agree. I'm like looking at the chat box, like you can make a face or not. Like, I love finding connections between stories and like myth and folkloric tropes and all of that. It's sort of like wonderful to see how stories and ideas must have spread over time and over the world.
For sure, for sure. Well, I thought what was interesting about your book, and I think it comes from reading a lot of Greek myths, I love that you gave them a lot of backstory. That there was, but like you like some of the myths that you read, they're like 3 pages short. And I'm like, that's it? What? Yeah. Like what? Or like, what was the relationship really like between mother and son? What was this like? And I really appreciated that you kind of just went in and very intuitively deepened that relationship and their backstory. And I thought that was such an interesting thing that you did.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, I feel like the hardest part of this book was one, figuring out which version, like which transliteration of the Greek words and names I wanted to use, but two, also just figuring out like which version of the myths to use, because there are so many, and some of the myths, including the story of Medusa, kind of changes over time and with the teller. So it was really interesting to kind of confront that, because, and also to remember, as I was writing, like, these, Tenny, come here. I don't know what you're doing over there.
Okay,
Sorry,
you have to show Kenny to everybody.
Come here. He's super shaggy right now, you guys. He really needs a haircut, and it's my fault because I can't read a calendar. Oh, what do you have? Oh, he was getting a ball out of the pantry. Here's Tenny. He's like, leave me alone. I want to sit down. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's so nice. Okay.
So cute.
Yeah, he's such a little guy too. If I put him next to the poster, the poster would be literally 5 times his size. But anyway, yeah, it was just like figuring out which version of the myth to use, and also remembering that, like, in ancient times, like, it really was a religion, and it really was a whole way of life. And the purpose of the myths was to, you know, tell people why things happen, why the weather would suddenly turn, or why earthquakes happen. But it was also to kind of justify their way of life and explain customs and different rights that they had. And so it was like interesting to write characters who still really did kind of believe in that religion, to have like personal stakes in these stories that we feel so removed from, because they didn't actually happen, but also, you know, and to have ownership over them, and to like continue these like a thousands of years long grudges. Like, I love how petty the gods are, honestly, in the stories. Like, they're terrible. Like, they're terrible gods.
Terrible, absolutely terrible, and motivated by the most banal things too, like emotions. Like,
yes.
You know.
Exactly.
I wonder if that's why the reason they feel so accessible, because they exhibit so many human emotions, and we can see ourselves in certain of them. I mean, obviously not the terrible, terrible, terrible side, I hope, but there is something about a God experienced such heartbrokenness over love or unrequited love, you know?
Yes. And then there are some, like, as an adult, like as a kid, I felt like it was this very special thing to feel even like very distantly connected to the stories, in a way, to be like, oh, like, if this did happen, you know, obviously it did not actually happen, but it's just like such a strange mythology. And then, like, as I've revisited it over time, I've definitely felt like differently. Like, so when I was younger, I loved Athena. Athena was my favorite goddess. And then as I got older, I was like, I just had this like discomfort with her that I couldn't quite articulate until I got to college. And my professor was like, well, Athena was a total tool of the patriarchy. She, like, I kind of think of her as sort of like the original, do you remember the debate about like strong female character?
A little bit.
Okay, so I feel like maybe 10 years ago, we really started getting into this discourse about like what a strong female character is. Because at the time, like in the 90s and early 2000s, a strong female character was essentially a character like Lara Croft, who was like a cool girl who basically just exhibited traditionally masculine traits that are like not really accessible to everybody. And I was like, Athena is the original like strong female character trope, in a way.
Total sense.
Yeah. Not like the other girls.
Yes, not like the other girls. That's so funny.
Has your relationship with any of these stories and any folklore and history changed as you've gotten older and understood it differently?
You know, like, I was just thinking, yes and no, but mostly I was just thinking in how fascinating it is. We're talking a little bit how these events, these gods those things did not really happen. But for I don't know how many years, people really believed that, and it was a religion.
Yeah.
And then we're, I don't know how many centuries far removed from this, and we can look at that and think, oh, these are stories. These are just, this is just myths. This isn't a religion. Like how, and I just think it's so interesting how that shift happens as a society. How we can start looking at some aspects of religion and be so far removed from it because of time and space or whatever, and look at it and think that's not a religion now. It's a myth now. And I think that process is so fascinating.
I was, you know, it's funny you said that, because I was also thinking about recently. So as I was kind of getting to launch lore, I was like, I want to confirm some details about Yaya, my great grandfather, with my mom and her family, just to make sure I was telling them right and give the correct story about them. And there is like actually some dispute in the family over where Yaya came from. Like,
really,
certain people say she came from Mani, which actually kind of makes a lot of sense to me, because it's kind of a remote region of Greece that was settled by Spartans, and like Yaya had like a lot of Spartan qualities.
Okay.
I will say. Yaya kind of, the other thing I love about her and the Greek side of the family is that there is like really, I think this is kind of true of like Greek culture now, just because of the religion and the way that religion and superstition kind of intermingle with each other. It's sort of like Yaya had kind of like this old world witchiness to her, where she had like this one soap that could like heal anything and solve any problem somehow. So it's sort of that dynamic of like, we love Jesus, but we will also curse the ever-loving crap out of you if you betray me. It's like that kind of dynamic, that side of the family. But there is some debate over if she came from Thessaly or if she came from Mani. And then I was going through Ancestry.com, which have you guys ever done your family genealogies before?
I want to so bad.
I found a really interesting story on my mom's father's side of the family that I'm actually using in hopefully my next book. It was like really fun to write into it, but I won't tell you what it is yet. But I found my great-grandfather's like naturalization application for when he was becoming a naturalized citizen of the US. And it listed it as her place of birth is Thessaly too. So I was like thinking how, that was a very long way of telling you guys like how easy it is to lose family history. Like history gets lost within, I think I read it was like within 3 generations. Like, and that's been true for us. Like we've lost track of a lot of our relatives in Greece just because of communication and poverty and all of that too. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think stories have this power because they're constantly retold, and for whatever reason, folklore, and maybe it's just because of, you know, before we had the internet, before we had books, that was really the only way to tell a story was orally. Sorry, I just like rambled for.
No, honestly, it made me sad. There is a story that I'm writing down that happened with my great grandfather when he was leaving Spain because he didn't want to get drafted in the Civil War, and he essentially escaped on a ship. But before he could do that, because he was going to be pressed into the service, he pretended to be dead. Like they came for him, and people were resisting and not wanting to go into the war. And so he had to lie underneath another body and pretend to be dead because they went around stabbing everybody. It's like things like this that are just, you know, and now that you're saying that, it really motivates me to sit down with my grandmother and be like, this is on my mom's side of the family. My father's side is like Amazon, my mom's side is Spain. And I don't want to lose that. It really, like, that is such a, I don't know how many times I've heard it, but you know that in 20 years, I'm going to sit down and be like, where was it? What was it?
Yes. I mean, I really highly encourage you guys to do this, to talk to your older relatives, especially now that we are in a pandemic and we can't see them.
Right.
I think like having that be a reason to call them or to have like a video chat with them if they are able to figure out the technology of Zoom and FaceTime. It's a great thing to do. Like we have a lot of regrets because my mom's aunts, my great aunts, we call them the aunts. It was sort of like a coven of aunts.
And I love that you say aunt and not aunt.
Yeah, my aunts.
Your aunt.
But they, you know, they were really kind of the keepers of the family lore and the family legend. And all of the aunts have since passed. The last living aunt died, I think, last year.
Wow.
No, maybe maybe in January or maybe end of 2019. But it was a really sad thing because ultimately, like, I don't think anybody asked any of them really to write down their memories or to write down this information, but between all of their kind of belongings, we've been able to kind of piece more information together. Like, we found this photo of Yaya's sister back in Greece, and it's this really cool photo. I'll see if I have it on my phone and I'll share it on Instagram stories if you guys want to see it.
I do.
But my mom sent it to me and she was like, oh, look, here's Yaya's sister. And, you know, it's this woman and her two sons who are adorable and wearing kind of like traditional Greek outfits. And then like 2 seconds later, my mom goes, oh no. And I said, what? And she's like, I flipped it over. And she's just like sent me a photo of the back, and it was like, mom's sister, Maria Petula, with her two sons. The eldest died after being bitten by a dog. So I assume that means bitten by a rabid dog. So I was like, oh my God, what a thing to like write down on the back of a photo. But yeah, it's like these family stories, I think, are so important and give us a sense of who we are just as much as like the bigger cultural folklore. So I definitely, yeah, poor Bill. Boy, he was so cute and so little too. Life was hard in Greece.
I believe it. Good Lord.
Yeah. I took this on a dark journey. Just
yeah, it's all right. I mean, I think it's just highlighting the importance of writing stuff down. So,
and you know, what's kind of interesting too is I really one of the things I loved most about Woven in Moonlight, and I loved a lot of things about it, but this I thought was so clever and so well done on your part. One of the main characters kind of comes to understand that these stories that she's grown up with and her understanding of her world and her place in the world is not actually kind of what she thought. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that, because that is a little bit sort of what happens in lore too, where you kind of get a character who is so in this world and has such a strong sense of purpose and belief in it. And then with Laura, she realizes at one point she has this moment of like, no, I have to like leave this. I can't stay in this. It will destroy me. So I'm wondering if you can like talk about your thought process on that too, since you were working with real history.
Yes. So this is probably going to be a rambly answer. So
please,
sorry.
I love them.
So in going to Bolivia, it's impossible not to notice the effects of colonization. And it's still very much a thing. And there is this sense of divide, and it's really saddening, like really, really saddening. And we had the former president of Bolivia who had remained in power and was kind of acting like a dictator, and he was totally corrupt. I kept thinking, like, what would have happened if the right person would have been managing this country and who was indigenous, who could bridge this divide? Like, what would have happened if we would have had the right person? And so I started thinking of this character who was living literally behind a wall and told these stories that were not true. And the moment that she leaves her home, she's able to test so many new things because she is being exposed to new things, which I think is the theme of Woven in Moonlight and how important exposure is. And so when she goes to the city, she's having conversations, she's meeting people who have different histories and perspectives and worldviews than her, and it really challenges her to question. And I think the point is that it's okay to question. It's okay to ask the hard stuff. And it's so interesting. As I was writing this character, she went through such a process of unlearning, especially because I think the whole point was Bolivia's history cannot be boiled down into good or bad. It cannot be oversimplified into black or white narrative. And I think that a lot of people live in the gray. And so when she gets there, she learns like, this was not true and this was not okay. And I had positive experiences. And then she crosses over and she realizes this corrupt government, the head of the government is corrupt, but not everybody is corrupt.
Yeah.
People are not binary, and people live in the gray. And challenging yourself to discover the truth and ask questions and do your own research. And that's essentially what she does by having these different conversations. So yeah, it was really important to me to show, or at least to show the inspiration behind Woven in Moonlight, because it was living history, and it's still something that we are dealing with today. And there has been such a great process of unlearning here in the United States, but not so much in Latino America.
Oh, interesting.
Well, yeah, there's been so many great stories and books here that have not been accessible down in South America. And so when I look around in Bolivia, I still see like how these stories are so important, because I think people in Bolivia need to be asking more questions just about another perspective, another worldview, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a big topic to fit in.
I know. I was like, we could have a whole conversation about just this. But yeah, it was, I really mean that. It was so well done. I was like so indignant on her behalf for the first, kind of section of the book. And then as she came to understand, I also came to understand. And I was like, but I like almost felt that reluctance with her of like, no, I like this new idea can't be right. Like, this is so different than what this main character believed. Like, I was right there with her. Yes. I'm trying not to spoil, sorry.
No, it's okay. I will say how important it was that what she was learning was, she didn't discover that Yaksans were all good either. And they were inspired by the Incas, and the Incas went around and they colonized so much of the Indian region. Like they colonized, and they had this 100,000 people army, and they were conquering all these different tribes. And in some cases they were made into slaves. Like the Incas weren't there is no binary here. And so I wanted her to learn all of it and for her to make her own choice.
I love that so much. One of the, did you study history in college?
I did. I majored in it.
I was wondering, because I feel like you and I kind of approach it very similarly. I went to school at William and Mary, as Carrie said earlier, and it is literally at one end of Colonial Williamsburg. If you guys live in Virginia and kind of want to do like a socially distanced outdoor activity, you can walk through. I always
wanted to do it, actually.
It's such a beautiful part of the country, and William and Mary is literally at one end, and the other end is the House of Burgesses. Well, the historic House of Burgesses that's been reconstructed, but it was kind of fascinating to live in this environment that was like a reenactment of the past. And they recently have the school and Colonial Williamsburg has kind of started really addressing the way that they were retelling the past too. So like one of the classes I took, it was a freshman seminar, and it was a voluntary Saturday all-day class. We took historical field trips in the Tidewater region. I loved it. That was totally
it sounds like something I would love.
No, it was so fun. We had like the best time every weekend. But then like when I was going through like sorority recruitment, they'd be like, "You're in an all-day Saturday class? Like, why?" But I loved it. But like one of the lessons that we learned in one of the lectures that's always stayed with me is like the way history is told and who is telling the history is just as important as like what is being told, if that makes sense. So it's like you have to kind of understand the narrative of history and why someone would be telling you the story this way and what biases they might bring into it and all of that. But yeah,
that is so important. So important for sure.
Yeah. So I guess we have a couple more minutes before we're going to take audience questions.
Okay.
Questions. The one thing I wanted to ask you was, do you have any recommendations or any sort of like general tips for people who are looking to incorporate like myth, history, folklore into their work? That is a really big question, and I know I just launched that at you.
Yes, I want you to answer it too, because I feel like you would have such good insight into this. So if you have any thoughts, I want to hear what you think. But
I mean, the biggest one is honestly to be very respectful and mindful of not, going through and culturally appropriating the stories of other cultures and other societies, especially if those voices are very underrepresented in the publishing industry. And it's also not sort of like cherry picking the cool things from each folklore. Even if you like love the story itself, it's being very mindful and respectful and like really asking yourself, like, am I the right person to tell this story? I don't feel like I had to necessarily be Greek in order to tell Laura's story or to write about Greek mythology. I think, you know, it's sort of become this like cultural inheritance of the entire West.
Yeah.
So it's just come to form the basis of like government and philosophy. So like everyone gets dibs on Greek mythology. But I think especially it's just sort of the sensitivity and like understanding why these stories were told and what you could potentially add to it or how you could really like interrogate the stories. Like that was very important to me with lore, to like approach these stories from a feminist way and be like very unflinching. It's one of the reasons why I love the cover so much is like, we work so hard to find the right gaze for that one lone eyeball. It couldn't be like kind of like too sultry. It couldn't be like come hither. It couldn't be like too like enraged. It's like serene, but also sort of challenging. And that's how I feel about the Medusa myth. And the Medusa story has been really reclaimed by feminist scholars, by even classic scholars, and the myth is kind of being talked about in a different, more feminist way, thank goodness. And she especially kind of came back around, her story came back around during the Me Too movement, which was one of the reasons why I was thinking about it so much as I was developing the story. I was reading a lot of material on patriarchal societies and how women are kind of like forced to navigate them, not kind of, we are forced to navigate them in a different way. And so it was very important for me to get that aspect of it right and to really kind of interrogate that myth.
I think you did a tremendous job. Like,
thank you.
And I really think that that is the most important thing when you are researching myths, for sure. Even with, for example, even with Woven in Moonlight, I chose to write from the point of view of Jimena, who is not indigenous. And even though my father was born and raised in the Amazon and we can trace back his ancestry and my grandfather, I still did not feel comfortable writing from the point of view of an indigenous person. That did not feel like that was my story to tell. I had more in common, and I had more experiences of visiting and going to Bolivia and seeing it, not from someone who was born there, but who has all of her family there, and being able to kind of give a little bit to Jimena, my own natural like experience of what I had growing up. So I think just being very careful and very mindful of how you're going to work your way into the story and whose point of view it feels the most natural, but also appropriate would be what I would add to that.
I think that's perfectly put.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Good natural stopping point.
Yes, that was a good stopping point. So I'm back and we've got some questions from the audience. And before we get started, I just wanted to say I recognize so many names that are here tonight, so many of our participants from our live, like in-person events that we have during normal times. And it's actually made me very emotional because I really miss all of you and I really miss live events. And it's just so great to see so many of you here. YA events are always my favorite events to run and to interact with the fans, and the questions are always the best. So anyways, warm fuzzy.
The community is awesome.
Yes, it's just so great. I'm like, oh, I know her. Okay, so we've got a lot of great questions, actually. We'll try to get through as many of them as we can. We're going to end around 8 p.m., so we'll get through as many as we can. I'm going to start with the hardest one first, but it is a fantastic question, and I think it's something that carries into all aspects of life. But Kate asked, do you have any advice for trying to write and be creative while the world is terrible?
Oh man. So I said in a newsletter recently, and this is obviously true, but 2020 was the first year I did not actually finish a new project. All I did was edit lore and like kind of edit the first 100 pages of a proposal for a new story. And I just felt like I was going in circles with them, and it got really slowed down because my publisher experienced furloughs. So the editorial production side was very different for this book. So Laura was like my constant companion through the pandemic. It's really hard. It's like, honestly, I found that the easiest thing for me to do, because I was so absorbed by the news during the day and like feeling very anxious and not productive and not creative. The best thing I did was that I kind of developed like a nighttime routine where I'd go to bed much earlier than I normally would. I was getting into bed at like 8 p.m. instead of like 11 p.m. And I would write by hand at night, and that like really helped me. But it's sort of like creating kind of a ritual for yourself where you're like, I'm going to write between these hours. I'm going to like make my cup of tea. I'm going to turn off the news. I'm going to put my phone in the other room, and just sort of like really carving out that time of focus. It's really hard though, with so much going on. Tenny is obviously agreeing with me.
Hey, all right, you have anything to add, Isabel?
Yeah, this was such a hard year. I think what helped for me, I did have to be super productive because I had various deadlines and proposals that I was juggling. I think one of the things that I did myself is I made a deal with myself every day. And this worked for me, it may not work for everyone, but the deal that I made was if I was productive for an hour and a half, I could do something awesome, like a reward for myself, whether that was like ordering a face mask and doing my nails and having like this thing. I would rent a movie that I've been dying to watch, as long as I had done something productive, and it helped me to do a little bit every day. There were some days where it was just really hard and all I wanted to do was read romance novels, honestly.
Yes.
A lot of that, yeah.
So, but the days that I made a deal with myself to be productive for an hour and a half to 2 hours, then I gave myself permission to just do what I wanted to do. And then I felt okay. And so that's
I was going to say, I love that because you mix self-care with actual productivity, which I think is the healthy way to do it. Sorry, I cut you off there. I was just like, yes.
No, it's fine. I mean, basically it.
All right. We have a few questions from Katharina here. I'm going to combine them a little bit. How do you work with your story to keep the reader's attention? And what do you do if you start to doubt the story and if it is exciting enough?
Isabel, you want to take that one? I'm going to go fetch Tenny because he's just going to keep barking at the person walking by.
No problem.
Related is a question from April asking for advice on pacing and keeping attention. So similar topic.
Yeah, totally. The best advice that I can give that was told to me and has helped me in writing is that you treat every chapter as if it's its own little story. So in this chapter, your character has a goal and there is something that is working against their goal. And it could be a very little thing like passing a math test, or it could be finding this or having to have a conversation. But as long as when you're treating each chapter as its own little story, you have that rising tension, you have them pursuing a goal, you have an obstacle in their way. And then at the end, you could leave it at a cliffhanger, or you can have like a little mini resolution. Like, for example, they pass that math test and they get their grade back and it's awesome. But every chapter should feel like this kind of rising tension and they should be pursuing something, and then they build and build and build until the climactic moment. So that's what I would say. Alex?
I mean, you like nailed it. So I'm like, what can I add to this? This is gonna sound, I always feel like a little foolish when I say this because it feels like it should have been very obvious from the start. But one of the most important lessons I have learned as an author is that when you get the feedback, you need to raise the stakes. That feedback means you need to raise the stakes personally for the main character specifically. Yeah. You have to raise the intensity of what happens if they do not get this goal and raise their investment in it. It doesn't necessarily mean like the bomb will, instead of destroying one state, it'll destroy the whole country. That's not really raising the tension, or raising the stakes. It sort of raises the tension a little bit. Yeah. But I always think that a very natural way to continue to add conflict into the story, which is really kind of what constantly hooks you, is these little moments of conflict, whether it's like conflict between characters, conflict between Tenny is like following my hands like he thinks I have something in them. it's really just making sure that, you know, the conflict between the antagonist and the protagonist, there is like some little personal element between them and that they are actually kind of after the same thing. Yes. Versus them kind of pursuing kind of like just colliding with each other. I'm not answering this well because now Tenny is distracting me, but yeah, it's a tough question. And I would say like the one thing to really remember is that for the vast majority of readers, Isabel, I'm curious if you agree with this statement or not. The vast majority of readers ultimately read for the characters themselves and read for that emotional attachment to the characters. So if you feel like your plot is not moving, or if you feel like there's not enough there to really sustain a reader's attention, you might want to look at the main character and make sure that their arc, their like how much they grow or what they learn over the course of the story is really big and feels dramatic enough for you.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, because your favorite books are always the ones that you are the most emotionally attached to the characters. And really.
Protagonists.
Yeah. Okay, so this is another great kind of hard question. Sorry, I'm throwing really hard ones at you guys, but they have come up with some really great ones. This is from Tina. Do you have tips for writing characters that are struggling with self-doubt and understanding themselves?
Ooh,
that is hard.
In some ways, I feel like that's every main character in YA, because like kind of the universal YA thing is that the character is trying to figure out who they are and who they want to be within their worlds as they head out into it. So one tip I have is that I learned this when I was writing The Darkest Legacy. An editor made this comment to me and I was like, oh yeah, like that actually makes a lot of sense. Characters can have self-doubt and they can experience these moments of crisis, but like ultimately they have to be taking decisive action within the plot. Like they have to like make a decision, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that based on what they believe and like what they want. So like they have to have a little bit of determination and surety, I would say, like a purpose in the story, even if they are, you know, struggling with who they are. Like Lore wants vengeance, but like she does have some real self-doubt and is really struggling with who she is as a person, but her desire in the book stays, well, it changes because all desire lines kind of change a little bit, but overall, like, you know what she wants and she is like, yes, I'm going after this.
I think too, if you're looking for a satisfying arc, meaning that your character starts one way and then finishes another way, I think something to keep in mind that is really helpful is that at the beginning of the book, you can identify what their wound is. Yeah. Like, what is the lie that they believe about themselves? And throughout the course of the novel, you're going to have people and situation and experiences and plot points that are going to challenge that lie. That they're going to have to be confronted with whatever wounds over and over and over again until they finally realize, no, I am not this way and I can do this. And then they're ready for that big climactic moment. So I think that's a good way, like a starting point, is that you have something that you can tangibly identify as that wound. And then at the end, they've overcome that lie.
Yes, perfect. That's a perfect way of explaining it. Another thing that the lie is sometimes called is the ghost, if you're more familiar with that. It's sort of, they're not exactly the same thing, but they're related. The ghost is something that's happened in the character's past that is like formed the beliefs and usually their desire that they have in the present. And it informs the lie essentially. So those things are kind of connected and help make the character feel kind of more cohesive. Yeah, Isabel explained it perfectly. I'm like, oh, yes. All
right, I'm going to throw something a little easier at you guys because I definitely have a couple hard ones there. This is from LT, and they would like to know, would you ever venture into other folklore?
Ooh.
Yes. Man, I hope I can do this one day. I'm majored in creative writing and history, but one of my concentrations was Roman military history.
Oh, cool.
And I am obsessed. Like,
I already want to read it and I don't even know what it's about.
Really cool.
I really want to write about a girl sneaking into the Roman army and becoming part of the legion. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe one day. But yes, I would really love to write a Roman inspired YA novel.
That would be so cool. Yeah, I'm the story that I'm working on now, I'm leaning into the Bracken side, you could say. It uses a little bit more Celtic mythology and folklore in this one. So it's been fun, but I also I miss the Greeks and I miss the pettiness and the drama and all of that. So I feel like I will eventually kind of circle back to another outing in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Okay. Emily is asking, do you know when the next movie adaptation will come out for either of your books or novels?
Oh, from your lips to the God's ears. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be another Darkest Minds movie. It did not perform well enough. The first one didn't. Yeah, I feel bad because it's so funny. I was like, oh no, my form of purgatory is that I have to break the bad news to multiple people every single day for the rest of my life. There's not going to be another movie. That's the downside. But who knows? Maybe something will happen with lore. I would love to see a Woven in Moonlight movie. That would be beautiful.
Oh man, I hope so. I think it would be so fun. All those animals.
Yeah. You have to read the book to understand what we're talking about.
Yes, sorry. Oh my gosh, yes.
No, our children's manager is obsessed with your book, Isabel, and she always says that. It makes such a good movie. I think Lore would make a great movie too. I'm only about a third of the way through it. I was actually very scared there'd be spoilers tonight, but there have been none. Thank you, everybody. But yeah, I think it'd make a really cool movie. All right, well, I think we're going to close with a great question to close on, and this is from Kate. And she is asking, well, first she says, hi, can you share any hints about what each of you are working on next?
Ooh. Well, I sort of spoiled it already. It's a story that uses more Celtic mythology. It is contemporary fantasy. I kind of pitch it as being a mystic female-led Indiana Jones.
Ooh.
So it's kind of fun. I get to talk about crystals in it, which I enjoy as a crystal person.
Very cool.
Yeah, I really hope you guys get to read it next because I love the story and I think it's a fun adventure.
So fun. I am literally working on a book manuscript called Together We Burn. It's due tomorrow. And it's a YA fantasy inspired by medieval Spain. And
I am dying to read this book, ever since you announced it. Please send it to me when you feel ready. I want to read it. Give it to me.
The premise of the book is it's Matador fighting in an arena, but instead of bulls in the arena, they're dragons. So
it's so cool.
Better and better, yes.
Yeah, love interest is this dragon tamer. He's very swoony. I've been having so much fun with it. And the main character is a flamenco dancer, and I had an aunt who was a flamenco dancer and from my mother's side of the family. So it was just fun. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you have the coolest family.
It's all because we're massive. I have 27 first cousins and we're massive. There's so many of us.
That's amazing. That's so nice though. I love really big families and I love, as we've said, the stories that come out of them too. That's so cool.
For sure.
But seriously, send me that book.
I will send you. I promise. I will send it to you. I promise.
Well, that sounds like we have a lot to look forward to. Thank you, ladies. Okay, so I think that's it for us tonight. I know we had a lot more questions. We can't always get to them all. Thank you so much, all of you, for submitting them because they, like I said, the events only are really much more fun when you get great questions like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yep. And then I just wanted to say goodbye and thank you again for coming. I know I say thank you 1,000 times at all these events, but I really mean it that we just are so appreciative of you guys coming to these events. And of course, to our authors, thank you so much for being here for tonight and for allowing us to share this content with our customers and try to keep having our customers get to meet their favorite authors, even during this crazy time when we are all stuck in our houses. So goodbye to everybody. Thank you. Please stay safe out there. We're almost there.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for coming. Alex, I'll see you on Instagram. Bye.